In the heart of Amish country, just east of Lancaster, PA, lies one of the strangest and most incomplete highway projects in American history. The result of this on-again, off-again project that was eventually canceled is most dramatic when viewed from the air. The uniform light green strip of land cuts a path through the irregular shapes of Pennsylvania farmland. Later in this video, I'll show you what the area looks like on the ground, but first, a quick history. In the 1960s, planning started on a roughly 20-mile stretch of road through farmland in Lancaster County, PA. The goal was to bypass Route 23 and help relieve congestion that had been caused by a rapid influx of new building and new cars on the road. By the 1970s, work had started on this project in the form of grading and earthwork. There was also several overpasses built so that the new route would be limited access, passing over some and under some other existing roads in the countryside. By 1977, though, funding had dried up. The national economy was struggling, and funds for many non-interstate highway projects had been put on hold. The partially completed strip of land was covered with 8 inches of topsoil and seeded with grass to stabilize the site in the hopes that new funding could eventually be allocated. Grass began to grow, and PennDOT started to lease the site back to area farmers for their livestock to graze on. The government tried several times to revive the project over the next couple decades, but they were unsuccessful. Over the years, community opposition grew, particularly from the Amish communities. Despite being famously quiet on the issues of politics, this was one where even the Amish community came out. There was one meeting in particular where as many as 1,000 members of the Amish community showed up to show their opposition to the project. By the late 1980s, it had been made pretty clear that the project would not continue, and for the next 3 decades, the area continued to be used as farmland. There have been some updates recently, though. As development has been spreading eastward from the city of Lancaster, officials have begun to look at new ways to utilize the goat path. In 2022, ground was broken on a 1.5-mile section at the very beginning of the goat path. This is now known as the Walnut Street Extension. At the end of this road lies a traffic circle and small parking lot. There's also a hiker-biker trail that runs alongside this new stretch of road. It's not entirely clear what the future holds for the remaining section of the goat path, but it seems like one day maybe the Walnut Street will be extended further and further into the goat path. So there was the basic history, and this is just going to be a quick run through of the historical aerial footage showing the changes over the years. And really there weren't many. If you go all the way back to the early 1990s, that's as far as the imagery goes back, you can see the track of the path, and really nothing changed over the years. Everything stayed about the same. Here's 2016, here's 2020. The only real change that's happened in recent years was following the Walnut Street extension, which, as you can see down here, is where that started. And that was only about 1.5 miles, so that really wasn't that significant of a portion of the goat path. But if we zoom in, now we're up to 2024, and you can see the completed part of the path. When I show what it looked like when I got there, this was the first parking lot that I parked in. It started flying the drone over that way. Another thing I noticed when I was there, especially the last time I was there is a lot of construction going on in the vicinity of the goat path, which makes me think that it may be used in the future as this development kind of creeps further and further out into the countryside. But here's the most recent one with the Walnut Street extension completed, and then obviously the rest of it still isn't complete. One other interesting thing I just wanted to do was using the measurement tool, you can see the length of the section that was started but not completed. It wasn't the full length of the original intended project, but it was about 6-7 miles, something like that, 5.5, depending on where you're measuring from and to. In a lot of places, it's hard to tell now what the goat path was going to be, but in places like this, you can see how big of an infrastructure project it really was. Multiple overpasses where the goat path was going to be passing over top of existing roads. And this right here is after I climbed up the embankment by the overpasses and just looking across what the goat path is. Here's one of the several overpasses that go over top of the goat path. It's not really a goat path right now. It looks more like a cow path, but I guess that's being a little nitpicky. Now I'm back to the beginning of the goat path. This is in between the section of the road that's been built and the section of road that hasn't been built. Ahead of me is that parking lot that I mentioned, and to my right is the hiker-biker trail that I talked about. So this right here is the part of the goat path that has been built. A little bit different form than it was originally intended, but you got a 2-lane road to my right and then this hiker-biker trail on the left. This only extends for about 1.5 miles though. Cases like this bring up a lot of questions about what the government should and shouldn't be doing when it comes to infrastructure development. While most people would probably agree that building and maintaining infrastructure is an important role of the government, the questions really start to come up when the projects have a particularly negative effect on the local communities. How do you weigh the rights of the local resident versus the purported greater good of the project? And it's a tough question, and it's going to be a little bit different from every project from one to the next. But as challenging of a question as this is, it's not one that can be ignored. It's critically important, and it's one that's going to keep coming up over and over and over again. In the 1960s and 70s, it came up literally thousands of times and affected millions of people during the build-out of the interstate highway system. At the time, it seems like the potential benefits of the interstate highway system won out over the rights of the local communities in most cases. Another more current example of this is happening in Maryland with the Maryland Piedmont Reliability Project.
That's part of the update from the Maryland Public Service Commission. They released a schedule for hearings on the project that would install 70 miles of transmission lines through 3 counties.
This is a 70-mile high-voltage power line that'll cut through some of the most pristine farmland in Frederick and Carroll County, Maryland. Based on the public backlash in these areas, it seems fairly clear that an overwhelming majority of the residents don't want these 500,000-volt power lines being forced on them and their property. PJM, the grid operator, has argued that the plan will benefit the community by improving so-called reliability. But based on how much time and effort it looks like they put into the community page on their website, I'm going to take that with a grain of salt. Other people have as well. Some opponents of the project have argued this project has little to do with the Maryland communities and a lot more to do with powering Northern Virginia data centers. So ultimately, the state of Maryland is going to play a big role in the outcome of this project, and it'll be interesting to see which they choose to value more, the overwhelming desires of their constituents or the corporate interest of several big players in the region. For a lot of these debates, there isn't really going to be an outright correct or incorrect way of handling them. And like I said, each one's going to have different factors at play, which makes the calculus a little bit different for each case. Things like who's going to benefit from the project, how many people will be negatively impacted, are there other less intrusive alternative projects that could achieve similar results, and is this project truly a public project or are there private interests that stand to benefit? And these are just scratching the surface of the questions that need to be asked to have any kind of honest debate. To me, I think individual rights should get the edge in these contentious cases. Kind of like the old saying in baseball, tie goes to the runner. I think in these debates where there isn't a clear answer, individual property rights should win out and be respected. There's just too many cases of people being taken advantage of in the name of progress, only to see that progress stall out and never actually live up to the hype that was originally being made about the project. This can be seen in countless highways to nowhere, grand redevelopment plans that stalled out, and eminent domain cases across America throughout hundreds of years of history. One of the worst of these cases was the Pfizer campus in New London, Connecticut. In the late 1990s, the city of New London, Connecticut, and the drug manufacturer Pfizer collaborated to develop a 90-acre project that would revitalize the city, allegedly. In addition to the Pfizer research buildings, development plans also called for high-end hotels, parks, and other projects. But the project hit a snag when some of the land that Pfizer deemed necessary for the project already had occupied homes on them. The city had agreed to clear out these neighborhoods as part of the deal that they made with Pfizer. So this led to a highly contentious development process. One particular case involving 7 homeowners made it all the way to the Supreme Court. And unfortunately, in my opinion, in a closed 5-4 ruling, it was determined that eminent domain could be used by governments in the name of private development. This ruling led to the remaining residents being displaced for the project and their homes being demolished. Pfizer's research campus was built, but the rest of the project stalled. And actually the Pfizer facility was built on a brownfield site that wouldn't have required much demolition as it was an old unused steel mill. Much of the land that was cleared using eminent domain sat vacant for years, and some of the residents felt like the lack of progress added insult to the injury of being forced to relocate in the first place. And to make matters worse, and unsurprising to some extent, Pfizer didn't turn out to be a long-term resident of New London either. After only 8 years at their cutting-edge research and development world headquarters, they chose to leave the city, which coincidentally was shortly before many of their 10-year tax breaks ran out. Now, obviously, this is one of the more egregious cases, but there are situations like this that have happened many times, unfortunately. And like I said, that's why I think it's important to err to the side of protecting individual property rights. Thanks for watching. If you found this stuff kind of interesting, please subscribe or think about subscribing. Also, if you have any good ideas for other interesting places or stories that I might be interested in making a video about, let me know, because I'm always on the lookout for new cool places to go.